Good morning and welcome to you all. Welcome to this seminar of the Inspired Week about multilingualism. I would like to present to you the speakers of today, talking about development of materials for bilingual education. So first of all, it will be Mr. Nguyen Minh Nhat of Vietnam, who will talk about mother tongue-based bilingual education in Vietnam. And our second and third speaker, because they present together, will be Justine Pillard and Daan de Buysere from Viet in Belgium, who will talk about how they help volunteers to focus on language strategies for newly arrived children. And our third speaker will be Ngansu Mtsatse, I don't know if I pronounce it well, who works at Fundawande in South Africa, who will tell us more about her valuable project for Reading for Meaning. So they will all give a short presentation of 10 minutes. And after those 10 minutes, you can ask them questions. If you have questions during the meeting, please keep your microphone switched off and type your question in English in the chat box of this Zoom meeting. That would be nice. After the three presentations, there will be a global Q&A for all of you. So you can ask all kind of questions you have about material development for bilingual education. At the end of this session, so we will also announce the workshops, the online workshops of next Tuesday, November the 24th. So both presenters who are going to do a workshop will explain it shortly, because of course, after these presentations, we hope to see you again next week on Tuesday to interact with you on materials for bilingual education. Please also stay after this webinar for an informal chat. You can also talk about the videos that you watched online before this webinar, and you can get to meet all presenters of today. Okay, so please all make sure that you mute your microphone and that you keep it muted during the presentations. Use the chat box of Zoom for all your questions, and please write them in English. If you don't know how to write them correctly, you can always use the free tool online, DeepL, DEEPL.com, to help you translating your question. You can give, of course, short reactions in this chat box, but please switch your camera off. So I see some participants who still have their camera on. Please switch them off. It will be better for the internet connection. It will be more comfortable. Thank you very much. I wish you a very, very interesting time during this webinar. And now it's up to me to present the first presenter. And that is Mr. Nguyen Minh Nhat, who works for different international organizations, including UNICEF, FAO, and Plan International in Vietnam. As an education officer of UNICEF Vietnam, he has more than 10 years of experience in bilingual education. He has supported the Ministry of Education and Training in improving the quality of inclusive bilingual teaching in early childhood development, focusing on the most vulnerable children, including children with disabilities, children affected by disaster and climate change, but also children of ethnic minorities. And one of his most significant achievements is the implementation of mother tongue-based bilingual education. He invited even ethnic minority experts in the development process of this bilingual material and early learning and development standards. It helps ethnic minority students to overcome language barriers and to create equitable access to education for all children, with preservation of their ethnic cultural values. Thanks to his focus on holistic intervention and cohesion, there is a significant improvement of language fluency in Vietnamese language and educational quality. Mr. Nat, please tell us more about your valuable educational program on mother tongue-based bilingual education in Vietnam.
Many thanks, Karen. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Let me share my screen. Can I start?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Please feel welcome to start.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to share with you some experience, our experience on the mother tongue-based bilingual education in Vietnam. UNICEF Vietnam have provide great support to Ministry of Education and Training in Vietnam for many years, piloting the mother tongue-based bilingual education in Vietnam in 3 main languages. Hmong in the northern mountainous area in Vietnam, Dry in the Central Highland in Vietnam, and also Dry in the south of Vietnam. This is the 3 most main ethnic minority language in Vietnam. Evidence based on the evidence, and also we believe that children learn more quickly through their mother tongue than unfamiliar language. And based on this concept and notion, mother tongue based bilingual education in Vietnam focus on the mother tongue based upload of the instruction. And this is the consider light of the bridge to the national language of the instruction later on in the later primary education and also the lower secondary education. So this is the, in short, we believe that with the good foundation of the mother tongue, we help the children learn Vietnamese better. So that is the spirit of our program. Quickly to share with you the slide on the ethnic minority and ethnic minority language issue in Vietnam. I don't try to repeat again this information because I believe that Dr. Hương, our colleague from Vietnam, on the opening day in 17 already have the thorough presentation on this issue already. I just want to reflect to reflect one important thing. Vietnam, Vietnamese is the national language, but ethnic minority language can be learned and can be taught in the school. Quickly to share with you, flexible of the bilingual approach. I will explain further why we call it the bilingual approach. You can see in the slide, first row is about the subject in Vietnamese, and the third row, the last row, is about the subject in ethnic minority language. So in this program, the children learn Vietnamese and ethnic minority as the individual subject. And you can see in the middle row at about the medium of instruction for all other subjects. It coming from the ethnic minority language from the pre-primary to the grade 1 and grade 2. And from the grade 3 to 5, it the both of the ethnic minority and Vietnamese apply for all subjects. And two language supplement and complement each other. And the later from the grade 3 and to grade 5, the amount of the Vietnamese will be increased and also reduce of the ethnic minority. So that's why we call it a flexible, because of the flexibility of the using the language in the class. So both of language support each other to help children not only develop language, but also for the education learning as well. This slide quickly share with you about the how to structure the bilingual and design the bilingual material. We believe that the bilingual material is not about the translate the word by word. It's about the reflect about the content and reflect about the culture. And we have the two side bilingual book material. One is the ethnic minority language, the other one is Vietnamese, and both sides show reflect for the language, not only for the language but also for the culture as well. That's why later on I will explain further how we can mobilize the local expert to involve with us on the material development. Uh, for the pre-primary material, we have the number of the material like the guidance book for the teacher, big book, picture story, and workbook. Later on, I will share with you about the material for the primary education. But one principle I just want to share with you now is all kind of the material developed based on the curriculum of the government, of the Ministry of Education and Training. For the primary grade material, you can see a long list of the subject. For instance, like for Vietnamese ethnic minority language, math, nature, society, history, science, craft, fire and physical education and music. And we already teach very uh, detail on the which kind of the textbook we develop. For instance, like for subject like Vietnamese, we have all the textbook, teacher book, and other. It's same for the ethnic minority language. Why some other subject is only for the teacher book and workbook only. I'm going to share with you some key information in terms of the material. You can see here all of the material developed based on the national program standard, and also the curriculum, and considering with the international experience and lesson learned. Almost of the pre-primary material for 5-year-old children are the bilingual material. For the grade 1 and 2 of the primary education, in ethnic minority language, and from the grade 3 to 5, it's about the bilingual material. So like I mentioned earlier, it when the student have the good foundation by learning Vietnamese and ethnic minority language as a subject, and then they apply the bilingual material from the grade 3 to 5. So it's very important for the children to have the good foundation of the ethnic minority language and then learn Vietnamese quickly. And end of the grade 5, the children are qualified with both of the ethnic minority language and Vietnamese, and ready for the entering to the lower secondary education. the Martin development is the follow quite very comprehensive and professional process. It's from the piloting, testing, and revising. One of the advantage of our program, we apply the action research in our program, and we pilot into cohort 1 and cohort 2. All of the lesson learned and also the experience from the cohort 1 were due to improve the quality for cohort 2. So action research means we implement that and we observe, reflect, and improvement. So that's why that it allow for our program it continuous improvement in terms of the quality. So that's why through the action research methodology and also apply in two cohort, it give us a huge opportunity to improve it not only on the material but also about the quality of the education. Some principle for the material development that want to share with you. I mean the experience from Viet Nam. Firstly, in line with the national standard and also the curriculum, and should be the relevant to the local situation as well. Participatory approach, like I mentioned earlier, the huge participatory from the different side, from the international, national experience, from the military, from the research institution, and also very important, ethnic minority experts, who are the one to help us to reflect the culture and also the spirit of the local situation in the material. We consider our program it not only for the language development but also for the quality improvement as well. You can see in our program we apply the new teaching methodology and reflection happen and it continuous improvement in our program. So in short, our program is not only for the development of the language but also for improve the quality of education. We are also sure for the integration and continuum from the pre-primary to the primary education, and two cohort, and also with the pilot and also with the reflection evaluation, it help us to improve the quality. And finally, we received the endorsement from the government, I mean the Ministry of Education and Training as well, for the application. There are some lessons learned. Very important. We need to have the language mapping and assessment before design the program and also to develop the curriculum and material, because there are so many different language in the country. I mean in Vietnam, and we cannot apply for all kind of the ethnic minority language. We have to define the popular one and most important one, and also with the script as well, because our program is not support about the language but also about the reading, writing, and we need not only the talking but also the writing as well. So that's why we need to consider this factor very important, very carefully before designing and develop the material. Again, it's the participation of the ethnic minority expert is very important. Holistic intervention and also not only the language development but also about the quality of education need to be considered. So just few slide about some example from our program in terms of the different material for the different language. You can see Hmong, you can see Khmer, and also the Rai as well. So let's share with you some, because we have only 10 minutes from the facilitator. So that's why I try my best to reflect some key important information only, and we have more time for the question and answer and also discuss in the coming day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nat. That was a very inspiring presentation about your bilingual education program for primary education and lower secondary education in Vietnam. It's really interesting to see all the materials that you have developed for teaching all subjects in Vietnamese, but also in the three minority languages, and that it helps children to grow, and that you even added action research to improve the quality and focus on lessons learned. Thank you very much. Now, I saw that there's our participants a little bit from all over the world, from Vietnam, from South Africa, from Belgium, from France. I wonder if you have questions for Mr. Nat. You can add your questions in the chat box of this Zoom session. And I think that Mr. Nat will be really pleased to answer your questions. So
okay, I can maybe ask some questions. I already received 2 questions privately in my chat. Thank you very much, Mr. Nat, for your presentation. One of the key aspects you mentioned several times was the ethnic minority experts. And there is a question on that. Can you give a bit more information? Who are they? How do you recruit them? How do they get involved? Can you explain that a bit more, please?
Yes. Thank for your question. Very good question. We have the good collaboration with the Department of Education and Training at the provincial level and district level. And when we pilot the program, we not only work with the national counterpart, but also work closely with our partner at the local level. And through our colleague in the local level, we identify the local expert. They are in the province and in community, and they also engage with some educational network or activity already, and the people in the people in the field know very clearly about that. So we starting to explore through together with our colleagues in the province and district, and define and approach the local expert. And then after we seek this sort of agreement both sides, and we provide them with the thorough instruction, and also with our program, ensure they understand the period and understand the design and methodology of the program, and to check with their capacity and how they can reflect the culture and also the language from Vietnamese to the local ethnic language. Like I mentioned to you earlier, the bilingual material is not about the translate word by word from Vietnamese to the ethnic minority language, but I'll reflect the culture and reflect about the content. So that's why we have to check very clearly with the local expert on that before working with them. Luckily, we have the very good expert for the local for both 3 language, Hmong, Khmer, and Ralai, and they involved with us from the beginning until to the end of the program.
Okay, thank you very much for that elusive answer. Maybe one last question. We saw that the study went up to 2015. So we were curious, what next? How does it go now with the program? Is it being implemented still, or what's the future of the program?
Sure. We after the pilot and with the success the result, and like I said with you earlier, the Ministry of Education and Training it endorsed for our program like one of the very important solution to address the language barrier for the ethnic minority children. So we continuously to support the Ministry of Education and Training for the expansion and continuous implementation of our program. What I can say is the 3 provinces in Vietnam pilot about the project continue to implement the program and even have with their own resort for the further expansion in their province. Also, another province nearby also they learn from themselves and they upload to the Ministry of Education and Training and apply the mother tongue bilingual education. What I can say, we still continue to do more because we try to have a wider application, but we are happy because the program still lie and also still apply wider in some part of Vietnam. I have to mention one thing. This is the only for 3 language only. Why Vietnam has so many different language, and many of them do not have the script. Our program both of reading and writing, so that's why cannot apply 100%. So we apply for some main part of Vietnam only. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Net. I'm convinced that we can still learn a lot from your best practices of everything that you have realized in Vietnam. Thank you very much. Thank you. For all the participants, if you still have questions for Mr. Nat, you can ask them via the chat and we will, Mr. Nat can answer them at 10:30. But now it's time for the next presenter. Thank you, Mr. Nat. Thank you. So the next presenters are Justine Pillaert and Daan de Buysere from of Vives University of Applied Sciences in Flanders. They work for Bachelor Early Childhood Education and Primary Education, and together they develop a coaching program for teachers and volunteers who work with newly arrived children who would like to learn the Dutch language in Flanders. So Justine Pillaert and Daan de Buysere, they coach teachers and volunteers to do language-rich activities with multilingual children and provide tips and strategies on how to focus on language acquisition thanks to these meaningful activities. Now, as it isn't very easy to ask open-ended questions during those activities, they even made videos focusing on qualitative interactions with children, with multilingual children. So Justine Pillaert and Daan de Buysere developed this practical tool with real-life authentic activities to explain the approach. So the trainees, volunteers, teachers observe these videos, select the activities that focus on qualitative interactions, and learn how to use the strategies and apply them in interactions with newly arrived children. And it's a COVID-proof online tool that we need in this timing. So I think we are all very interested to know more about this project. Justine Pillaert and Daan de Buysere, are you ready to tell us more about your research projects?
Yes, I would be glad to.
You.
I will quickly share my screen so that you can all follow the presentation. I think that should be okay now. Thank you for this nice introduction, Karen. Daan and I will indeed talk you through the presentation of effective interaction with multilingual children, key to learning languages. And maybe you have seen the introductory video presentation, in which you will have seen that our input and this workshop, as you already told, Karen, are actually linked to an ongoing research project of the teacher training program of Vives, one of the institutions of higher education in Flanders. And our teacher training institution is actually based in Kortrijk, and this is important because the research project is a cooperation with the city of Kortrijk. And the city has been confronted in the last decade with a rise of children with multilingual backgrounds and children that actually do not speak Dutch at home and are thus non-native newcomers. When they attend school, however, they have to learn Dutch to follow classes, to make friends, etc. There are many initiatives to teach Dutch to children, but these initiatives are organized at school, but also extracurricular. Why are there extracurricular activities? Because in Flanders there is a 2-month summer break, and this actually can cause a decrease in language proficiency. And this decrease in language proficiency is actually even more visible for non-native newcomers because they don't speak Dutch at home and they don't interact in Dutch over the summer. And that causes that decrease. That's the reason why cities such as Kortrijk or cooperation partner organize so-called summer schools. During 1 or 2 weeks, newcomers improve or renew their language skills in Dutch through leisure activities. For example, cooking together, playing games, listening to stories. And all these activities are actually meant to learn Dutch informally. You can see this in the picture, but those activities are designed and supervised by volunteers. Those volunteers do a great job in designing those playful and attractive activities, but sometimes they're not as effective in terms of language acquisition. That's why volunteers feel the need for some support in second language acquisition, maybe even in designing those effective activities and in stimulating interaction with second language learners. And that's actually why we introduced this research question for our ongoing research project, how to support volunteers in creating language-oriented activities for non-native newcomers during leisure activities.
And to find an answer to that research question, we have been looking into ways to support our volunteers. And because the summer schools focus on leisure activities, we focus on informal language acquisition. So our literature tells us that interaction is a key to learning new languages. And stimulating interaction seems easy, but it turns out not to be. And to train our volunteers and to give anyone with an interest in stimulating qualitative interaction tips and tricks, we gather different features of qualitative interaction in a framework. And this framework, which is a work in progress, shows 4 building blocks that help to design those activities and that also inspires and stimulate qualitative interaction in general. So we will briefly discuss those 4 key components of our framework. And the first one is meaningful activities in a rich, safe, and positive environment. And that's not a new insight, but designing such activities turns out to be not that easy. And a meaningful activity is an activity in which you need language to reach a certain goal. It's not about grammar lessons. It's not about vocabulary lessons, examples of a rather formal approach of language learning, but it is about activities in which you need language to discuss, to create, to think, or to play. And for example, if you want to do a cooking activity, it's interesting to go out and to do some grocery shopping. The purpose of this activity is not solely to learn language, but it is to go out and to buy groceries. And language is, of course, the means to get this job done. So you can also see in this picture that the group of children is rather small and that their children know each other. And this helps to create that safe environment we just talked about. And the children are allowed to make mistakes. The volunteer is supporting them. It's giving them positive feedback and is helping them to grow in their language acquisition.
Indeed, and the second building block is a well-taught language offer and vocabulary. This actually means that you are thinking about what language is interesting to teach to your specific group of language learners. I will give you an example to make that clear. If we go back to the market and think about the activity of grocery shopping for the cooking activity, and let's say you want to prepare a pizza with the children, then you want them to be able to ask for certain vegetables on the market. And for example, you want them to be able to ask for tomatoes or maybe, and I know this is a controversial topic when talking about pizza, but pineapples. that's also some vocabulary you might want to teach them, and even vocabulary linked to money, and to give them tools to do a fluent conversation with the people on the market they have to buy those ingredients from. This is actually also an ideal situation to use the multilingual background of the children in your group. For example, if you want the children to prepare the grocery list beforehand to cook the pizza, you can choose to let them discuss the necessary groceries in their mother tongue and afterwards link back to Dutch. For many volunteers, and actually even teachers in Belgium, this is a new insight. Using the mother tongue in a classroom setting or in leisure activity setting is actually not easy for volunteers, because they feel like they might lose control, and that's why it's not often applied. However, as you might also have heard in the presentation of Caroline Vreens at the beginning of this series of sessions, home language is a fundamental resource for well-being and learning as well. So there are many reasons to actually allow home language in classroom contexts or here in language activities or leisure activities.
The third part of our framework is a real interaction, and that's probably the key component of our framework. Qualitative interaction focus on authentic interactions in which you see your conversation partner as a full partner. So you don't ask questions on which you already know the answer, but you use language for what it's meant to be, to interact, to discuss a topic together. And that sounds obvious, but it turns out to be a challenge to design such activities. And when children go and buy ingredients at the market, they have such real conversations as they discuss what they need, and they have to interact with market vendors to buy what they need. And also when children talk with volunteers or in small group conversations, it's important to stimulate that authentic, informal conversation. And the last building block is support and feedback. And of course, language learners need support when they want to say something. So you can help them with vocabulary, or you can give them indirect feedback when they make mistakes.
And indeed, you can use that support and feedback in another way as well. You can also use it to make your language learners more confident when speaking. For example, take the example of grocery shopping once again. In asking those ingredients to a stranger on the market, which can be rather exciting or stressful, you want to teach the children some sentences they can use, such as I would like 5 tomatoes or 1 kilogram of tomatoes, or you can learn them how to say thank you or have a nice day. And very important for this building block support and feedback is actually that you just keep the conversation going. You cannot block the speaking chances of the children by constantly giving them corrective feedback or too many feedback. This can be overwhelming and can damage the self-image and confidence of the learners.
And you may have noticed that around those 4 building blocks, there are several sub-items that may help volunteers with the preparation of their activities and with stimulating interaction during those activities. But we will not be discussing them with you in this session. But if you take part in the workshop next week, you will discover more of these specific features. And next to this background, as Karen told us, we're involved in the coaching and training of volunteers who are working with non-native newcomers. And it's not always easy to organize training sessions on location. So we design an online coaching tool. And goal of this first step of our training tool is to get to know those 4 building blocks of the framework. And a rather theoretical approach of training volunteers with a reader or a manual appears not to be that effective. So we decided to confront them with a series of real life examples of summer school activities. And in the training tool, trainees are asked to compare a series of authentic summer school activities and to decide which of these activities are triggering the most effective interaction. And by clarifying their choices, volunteers are using the framework, and by doing so, their awareness of features of effective interaction raises. And that's exactly what we want to do with you next week, a comparison of a series of videos. And in our next session, we will show you some of those videos, and we look forward to your thoughts on qualitative interaction in those clips.
Thank you all for your attention. If you have any more questions, you can, I presume you can ask them now for a few moments. And if you don't have the time to ask your question now, we will be happy to answer them in the Q&A section of this session.
Thank you very much, Daan de Buysere and Justine Pillaert, for this interesting presentation about language acquisition for newly arrived children during summer schools. It was very interesting to hear that you focus on meaningful interactions, meaningful so that the language is really needed for the activity, that you focus on valuable words to use for the conversations so they can buy their groceries themselves, for example, and that you focus also on support and feedback in a safe environment. I would like to know if there are questions for Justine Pillaert and Daan de Buysere. I give the word again to my colleagues. Mrs. Inge van der Vijver, can you see if there are questions in the chat?
There is one question, and I also have one question for you. Maybe on the volunteers. It's good that they are supported to get the most out of what they are doing with their newcomers. But aren't we expecting much of these newcomers? Are they receptive for all those trainings and support that you give? What is your feedback on working with these volunteers?
That's actually a very challenging aspect of our project, and that's also why we designed a research project around this topic, because working with volunteers is actually not easy. And indeed, most cities are already glad that they have volunteers, that they have people who want to help them out, who want to organize the summer schools, and so it's really a it's all really challenging to decide what we can expect from those volunteers, and that's why we are working in the work field actually with volunteers themselves, not saying what they have to do, but actually trying out our training tool, literally asking them if they see this training tool as something that's helpful or as something that's just more work for them to do when they are working on the development of language activities, etc. Do you have anything to add to that, Dan?
Well, no, I think it's right with what you told us. It's a challenging thing, but on the other hand, you feel when you do that together with them, they're very eager to hear that feedback, and that's also something they really express themselves. Please give us some support in doing this. So it's true that we are expecting a lot, but on the other hand, they're very eager to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. I also have some questions on translating this to a more formal setting, a classroom setting with a curriculum with children already speaking fluently Dutch. You maybe also see them in the chat. Can you elaborate maybe on this? Is the model applicable in a formal schooling setting?
Well, of course, it's true. Our project is focusing on summer school activities, which is a rather specific setting. But on the other hand, I think it's very clear that focusing on interaction, even in a formal classroom setting, is so important. And I think as teachers, we sometimes think that that's something we do all the time. But when you monitoring that interaction, especially with younger children, it turns out that there is a lot of silence in a class and a lot of waiting time in a class. So that focus is important for a classroom setting, to focus on the interaction chances for children, as you know that interaction helps them to develop language.
And if you look back at the model, you will see that that all the building blocks and all the specific topics are actually also applicable in contexts with interaction with children who already speak Dutch.
Okay, thank you very much. Then maybe also a specific question on the situation of OCAM classes, so classes, the formal setting for these newcomers. Would you think it is possible to apply the model there also in interactions?
I think I presume that with OCAM classes, you mean children of ages 12 and up. The the building blocks are actually applicable there as well. Of course, the focus on informal language acquisition is a bit less in those contexts, because formal language learning is actually also applied in those classes a bit less than it is in those summer schools or in or for children that are a bit younger. But in interacting with those children or youngsters, actually, you can also use those tips to actually train their informal language acquisition.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Daan de Buistre, and thank you, Justine Pillaert, for this interesting presentation about the project Summer Schools Language Teaching of Newly Arrived Children. So it's time for our third presentation, and that will be Ngamso Mtsatse, Head of Relationships at Fundawande in South Africa, a non-profit organization for early reading literacy in South Africa, and she's a researcher at Stellenbosch University for the research project Reading for Meaning, supporting teachers who teach from grade 1 to 3. Between 2014 and 2016, Ngamso was a researcher of the Center for Evaluation and Assessment, where she was involved in planning and executing the progress in reading literacy studies 2016, the polls we all know. Ngamso pays a lot of attention to the teacher's experience in class interventions. Native speakers of African home languages are also important partners for the co-creation of the material development, and all partners in this research project focus on high quality at the lowest price. We all know, of course, that when you develop material and give trainings to teachers, that changing practice takes time. But even so, in January 2019, Ngamso Mtsatse was selected to be on the top 30 on the 30 global literacy leaders by the International Literacy Association. Congratulations. Her research focuses on improving the teaching and learning of African language in the foundation phase, as well as developing valid and reliable assessment tools in African languages. Ngamso Mtsatse, please tell us more about your valuable project on reading for meaning for South African kids at Fundawande in Cape Town. It's up to you.
Thanks, Karen, for that very quite intensive introduction there. Good morning to everyone. Good afternoon to some of us that it is in the afternoon. Greetings from Cape Town, South Africa. So what I will be sharing with you today is an intervention that Fundawande is currently implementing in the Eastern Cape. And just before I get into sort of taking you through our model and at least our understanding of what it will mean to shift sort of learning outcomes in South Africa for learners that are being taught in their home language. I mean, I mentioned in the opening session that South Africa as a country, we embrace our multilingual context. And in the first 3 years of schooling, kids are being taught or can be taught in their own mother tongue language. From grade 4 onwards, they do the transition in being taught in English. So while we believe that it's very important for us to crack the code or to build a strong foundation in reading in a home language, I mean, we know this, research has yielded to this. Our first presenter also mentioned the importance of mother tongue and the transitioning or using that foundation for being able to acquire proficiency in any other additional language. So that's the one thing. And that's why we've specifically chosen to work in African languages and to specifically work in the first 3 years, because at least we believe that we need to get the foundations right in the beginning. And most sort of from grade 4 onwards in South Africa, English is the mostly used language in schools and in higher education training, and as well as in the labor market. So yeah, so that's basically the rationale why we specifically focus on early reading and African languages. So just also a quick illustration here of how the South African education system is structured, or at least if you look at it from a finance point of view, that we divide schools into 5 quantiles, from quantile 1 to 5, and typically your schools that are between quantile 1 to 3 are your no fee schools, and usually these are the kids that come from very disadvantaged backgrounds in most cases. Also, the majority of the 60%, 66% of the kids are also the kids that come from African language, mother tongue or home languages. So for us is to say, if we can target the majority of the kids in the country, or at least in the system, where would we intervene? So it makes sense is to say, from your quantile 4 and 5 upwards, it's usually your functioning schools, your well-performing schools, and they're doing pretty much okay. You know, where we're trying to understand and unpack reading in mother tongue is predominantly targeted in that quantile 1 to 3 schools. And I mean, South Africa in total, we're looking at about 25,000 schools. I mean, it's a hell of a lot of learners, but I'm not quite convinced as much as when I read other stats of other countries. But it's basically almost 13 million kids in the system, almost half a million teachers that are teaching in our schools. So, I mean, we in South Africa, we've taken part in the Pearls literacy study, which unfortunately, we don't have very reliable data on national assessments to be able to give us a dipstick of what is happening in our system in regards to literacy or reading. So we rely a lot on Pearls, and since the latest Pearls results came out in 2017, it kind of shook the sector, you know. So South Africa kind of goes into this cycle of every 4 years when there's a release of terms for the maths or release of Pearls, and everyone is like, okay, now we need to do something. But I think what I'm trying to highlight here is that if you look that although it was assessed in grade 4, it was basically measuring the language policy of whether kids are being taught or learn how to read in their mother tongue from the first 3 grades. What I've personally found interesting is that in the polls, it's almost 90% of these kids reported that the language that they wrote the test in is the language that they speak at home. So for example, I'm Xhosa, so it meant that I speak Xhosa at home with my family, parents, you know, community, and I most likely will be in a isiXhosa school where I'm being taught in isiXhosa. I'm being taught how to read, I'm being taught mathematics and how it is isiXhosa. So the interesting point here is that even when kids have access to their own home language, right, it does seem, at least in the African languages, that our literacy rates are not drastically improving. And I mean, more than 90% of these in the African languages group per se, which is 9 out of the 11 official languages, kids are not even able to reach the low international benchmark. So for me, this type of demonstration raised a lot of question marks. Is to say, what are we doing wrong in the system? You know, we're not talking about a second language here. We're talking about the language that you interact with or interact with on a daily basis. So, I mean, due to the hype around Pearls and the low international benchmarks, then sort of Funda Wande came to birth and was really interested in trying to figure out, you know, what are the best ways in which we can shift home language teaching outcomes in the country. What does it take? What does it mean? Although recently in the past, I would say 5 years in South Africa, there has been a lot more work done and research done in trying to understand how do you teach African languages. But previously to that, there hasn't been that much work done. Often what had happened historically was that you just take the methods that were used for English, for example, and you just copy and paste that into teaching African languages. So no language structures were taken into consideration. No context was taken into consideration. It's just basically, well, this is how you teach English, so we're going to follow the same method for the African languages. And I mean, that was general practice for many, many, many years. So trying to understand what does that look like, what are the best practices, and considering that most of these kids come from poor backgrounds where typically in these classrooms they're overcrowded, the teachers are themselves haven't had meaningful experiences. How do we go about this? Okay, so we believe that, or at least our theory of change understands very popular Elmo, where he says he understands in improving student learning at scale, because remember we were working with that chunk, that majority of learners, which is the 66% kids in the system, is to say that you need to intervene at 3 different levels. That's the student, that's the content, that's the teacher. Now, at Fundawande, for instance, we agree to say that the content, I mean, our curriculum CAPS is when you compare it to international curriculums, is very much on par and very much good, you know. It is well written, it is aligned to current research and international standards or reading skills. So we were quite convinced that no curriculum, or at least the content, shouldn't be changed. It's targeted at the right level. And I mean, South Africa as well has a history of continuously changing its curriculum. I think from 1994 up until date, we've went through 5 different types of curriculum. So we are saying, no, you know, we're quite happy and we're convinced that our curriculum is very good. And if you look at the student level, a little bit complex to unfold, because there's a whole lot of other factors that actually are inputting at the student level. For example, things like your economical background, your parental, your own parents' education levels. There's many different factors that sort of are influencing at a student level. So quite a consensus decision was made to say, we believe that the curriculum gets implemented in the classroom, and that we understand teachers as being the engines in changing teaching practices, and therefore ripple effect into the learning skills or the learning outcomes. So our intervention typically is focusing at a teacher level. So we've opted for that sort of low, that bottom circle over there. And in trying to unfold what does this literacy reading thing look like for African languages, we also needed to work with a reading development framework, which I think this is very popular. We know all the skills that contribute towards reading, and for us it's more to say, now these are the different concepts or skills or components of reading. What does it look like specifically for African languages, and trying to unpack that and understand that in a better way. Okay, so our sort of materials development is I often describe it to say it is in 4 sort of main sort of functioning areas within the intervention. We've got a training component, we've got materials, teaching materials that teachers use in their teaching. We do a lot of relationships and advocacy around making sure that mother tongue education is very high up in the agenda. We push that quite hard from national level with provinces that we interact with. And of course, research. Everything we do, we see it as a pilot. We're not saying, like I mentioned earlier on, we have not cracked the code, and we do believe that it's an iterative process, and we only are learning from the current materials and or different interventions that we are working with. Okay, so at Fundawande, our materials predominantly consist of a whole bunch of things often. And I'll touch on this at the end of my presentation of this whole bunch of things that are moving around constantly. But typically, a teacher in our intervention school, one will receive an anthology, so a graded reader stories for each grade that's on top, depending on what grade they teach, and every single learner in that classroom will also receive an anthology. Now, why did we do that? Resources in these poor schools is a huge, huge problem. I often tell people, I'm like, how do you play soccer without a ball? You know, so how do you read without books and stories and fun and exciting books? So we knew very early on is if we want to change this learning outcome, we need to be able to provide the resource to some extent and at a cost-effective extent, these resources to be able to get kids reading in the classroom. Very often these kids, they would have only the Bible as a reading material at home. This is a book that they take home, they can read it at home, they can read it in the classroom, they have their own book. So it's not, we're trying to read a small story book and there's like 10 of us around this book. And then for the teacher specifically, at the teacher level is the lesson plans, which are pretty much scripted, structured lesson plans, and as well as booklets, which compromises those 3 booklets over there. And we have YouTube videos. And please go onto our YouTube page, watch our videos, subscribe, give us comments and your thoughts on our videos. But what we've done with the YouTube videos is basically to show best practice of these methodologies, right? Because often, like I mentioned earlier on, some of these teachers themselves haven't had meaningful training. And it's often the case that I teach how I was taught, you know, very chorus teaching, very teacher talking at the learners most of the times. And these sort of modern and more engaging ways of teaching, some of these teachers haven't been exposed to that. So we are trying to make them unlearn some, not all of their teaching habits, because some of them are useful in the classroom. And we try to then demonstrate to them, well, this is the way in which, for example, how you would do a vocabulary lesson, just for argument's sake. And these videos, we've shot them deliberately in your Quanta 1 to 3 schools. So what we didn't do is to go to a very high performing school that is a Quanta 5 school that has all these technologies in the classrooms and, you know, fancy equipment or whatever the case is, because we felt that it was very important that our end receiver, which is the teacher in your poor schools, can see themselves through our material. So in watching those videos, you see a teacher that looks like you, number one, and also is in a classroom context that is very similar to yours. So overcrowdedness, limited resources, for example, and so on. And it was very important for us to demonstrate that in our videos, in our materials, that how do you go about when you have those different challenges? What are the other ways or alternative ways which you can teach reading, for instance? Okay, very also importantly is the training component. And what we've done here is, like I mentioned, I'm going to keep going back to the teacher, is that because majority of our teachers that are in the foundation phase have not had meaningful experiences themselves. So we realized that as much as we've got teaching material that can assist them in changing their practices or adding on to the current practices, is that it's very important to also build content knowledge. Right, and we really quite strong on this one, is that we do believe that interventions that don't have any type of training element to it, we wonder whether if that is sustainable. So what we've done here is we realized that, okay, the target age group that we're working with often is about 55, between 55, 60. It's ever changing for every 3-4 years, and to say, all right, these teachers most probably have 10 years max left in teaching, right, or even less in most cases. What are the key things a foundation phase teacher teaching in a home language classroom would need. Okay, we're not trying to take you through another B.Ed, Bachelor of Education degree, because most probably they're not interested. You know, maybe they're not. They just, for them, it's I want to teach, and how do I do that? Give me the solutions in my classroom to be able to help my learners to be able to read better. So then what we did there is our 12 modules, and we developed an advanced course, and we partnered up with one of the universities in the countries, and that offers this advanced course for teachers to enroll in. And it's a very short course, but they do get accreditation for it. So it does motivate teachers to enroll for it, because often also the typical system in South Africa of ACE points, teachers won't typically enroll for courses if there's no sort of reward at the end of it. So for this one, it was very important that we tick all those boxes so that it can encourage teachers to enroll. Further than that, what we did was we worked very closely with one of the provinces that we are working in currently, which I'll speak to shortly, and we enrolled their subject advisors into the course as compulsory. Because these are the people that will be supporting the teachers in the classroom. The subject advisors that go and do visits and the support teachers, and etc. And we felt strongly is that not just to capacitate the teachers, but we also need to capacitate those that need to facilitate the teaching, or the teachers teaching in the classroom. So there they are. They look pretty happy to be part of the course, they are now they're actually finishing off. They should be writing their last exam. So we're quite excited to have the first sort of subject advisors at a province level complete such a course. And this course is the first course to be aligned to the African language framework, which was a recently released framework by the DBE in regards to the teaching of African languages in the foundation phase, which was prompted by the pearls. Another thing which we then, very last minute, we were like, with COVID and with schools closure and all this uncertainty of what is happening and what our teachers are doing, and etc. We thought, and we partnered up with Western Cape Province in developing what we're calling the Reading Academy booklets. So this is a much more condensed version of that advanced course.
Thank you. Can you finish your presentation in a minute? Thank you.
No problem. No problem.
It's very interesting. So,
all right, Karen, no problem. I will wrap up shortly. Yeah. So I'll skip through that. We've gone through that. So our intervention in the Eastern Cape currently has coaches who would come and support teachers, and obviously using our materials. And we're working in predominantly 3 districts, or we're piloting in 3 districts at the moment. And we received some of our midline results. I'm not going to go through this because of time, but this report is available on our website. And after a year of intervention, has been shown to be quite positive. We're also launching another type of RCT next year in Western Cape, in Limpopo. And this one, the only difference, instead of not just only having coaches, we're also exploring the idea of teachers' assistants in these classrooms, in these Quanta 1 to 3 classrooms. Also, this report, if you're very interested in, our materials were evaluated by Harvard, so the very interesting findings from there, which we are learning, as I mentioned. And I think the sort of how I'm going to end off is, after a year of trying to explore and unpack and understand all of this, which can get very overwhelming and complex sometimes. Like Karen mentioned, change takes time. We know that, we've realized that. And for us is the reflection on the concept of generic drugs. So how do you get high quality materials at a very low cost, in a sense of when we think about scalability? And obviously from, like I said earlier on, we have all these different materials. We have this, we have that, we have many things for the teacher to navigate from. And the key findings from our reports was that teachers are saying less is more. I can't be shifting from this book, then that book, then that book. So having less moving parts, and of course, teachers' experience of the intervention is very crucial. So how teachers perceive the intervention, how teachers perceive the materials and feel if they are empowered to be able to engage with it is very important. Because if you put them off first time, they're not going to even try. And obviously our biggest mandate is to say, how do we use philanthropy money to influence government and to influence what policy says? And of course, I think many of us here would agree is that rigorous evaluations of the programs are very crucial. So I will stop right there. Apologies for dragging on.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was very interesting. You talked about the Pearls results in 2016 for literacy, that they were an eye-opener in South Africa. I think that was a global issue. We had some eye-openers here as well, and I heard other countries as well. But thanks to your program, your new material, you have this new content to change teacher practice, and therefore you need, of course, your teachers. That they do the coaching and change their practice. Thank you also for sharing it on YouTube and on your website as a free e-resources that have been evaluated by Harvard. I'm impressed. Thank you very much. I'm quite sure there are questions for you. So I give the word again to Inge van der Wever.
Okay. I think maybe we have time for one clarification question for Nagamso. It's about the teachers. You mentioned it briefly in the end. Their experience is really important in this story. So there's a question on did you experience resistance from teachers on the approach you work with? And how do you cope with that resistance from teachers?
Yeah. So like I said, we it's something that we take not for granted at all. As a result, as we're iterating this process, we constantly check in with teachers, not with academics that are sitting at universities, and maybe not with government officials that have these unrealistic expectation of teachers' context. So for us, that is number one, crucial step that we don't miss in our materials development. Yes, I think change is inevitable, that you will find resistance. I think that is just part of the process. And like I said, we're working with teachers that have been in the system for years, experienced teachers, teachers that will tell you, listen, I've been doing what I'm doing for 20 years. Now, why are you going to come in and try and change things? It was tough. It took some time, a long time, but I think what I am realizing more and more is when you're working in interventions and working with anyone, in fact, relationships are a foundation. And taking time to build those relationships, to build the trust with teachers, with the school management, with the district, and etc., it will go a long way. And really taking an approach of saying, you're not here to detect what teachers must do, you're doing this wrong, do this or whatever. But really, as it is a joint venture, it's a journey. Our coaches will always tell you, it's a journey. We walk this walk together with the teachers. There are things, like I said, there are things that we've learned from these teachers. It's not like everything is not helpful or useful. There's a lot that is useful. How do we bring that on board? Things that we are still struggling with, and criticism in a lot of these types of designs or models is that it takes away teacher agency. And people that are in a teaching agency field will tell you it's crucial, but we still, like I said, it's only been, with COVID now, we've only literally been in schools for just over 13 months. So it is a learning process. We're still we still have one or two teachers that are still resistant, but we're persistent and we're patient, and we try our best to build those good relationships to be able to get our program to be fully implemented.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Karen, we can maybe go to the big Q&A session now.
Yes, indeed. It's now time for the big Q&A sessions. If you have general questions to the presenters, you can ask them now via the chat, and then I will give the word to Inge van der Wever again. I just want to check first, Inge, if there are questions left in the chat that haven't been asked yet, we can maybe start with those.
Well, I have a more general question, both for Mr. Naat and Ms. Nagamso, on the difficult issue of finding teachers, in fact, to teach in the minority languages and in these regions. How do you find them? And also, in case that teachers are appointed to a certain region, what do you do if they don't master the language of that region? How does it puzzle together with the different languages and the capacities of teachers?
Would like to start, Ngamso? Would you like to start? Answer?
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So what typically happens in at least the foundation phase training, in most cases and in most courses, university courses, they will have sort of your English and one additional language that you need to be trained in teaching. And other than in Gauteng, where you find it's very densely multilingual, you find all of our official languages there in that province. In most cases, other provinces, like I mentioned in my opening presentation, is that you'd find that there's a list of like 2 or 3, you know. And what happened a few years ago when we realized that there was a shortage of African language teachers in the system, the government then went on providing bursaries. Funsa Shaka was one of the sort of prerequisites so that we can encourage young people to enroll for B.Ed and also take up African languages. That was a means of trying to capacitate the system itself. And in terms of placement of schooling, I mean, unless you're on a Funza Shaka, which you get placed, but in most instances, you can choose the school that you apply for a job and you know, you get to work with. So one does have the flexibility to say, for example, I'm Xhosa, I wouldn't be able to go and teach in a Swati school, for example. I wouldn't apply there. And I think even in the placement program that they do, is they do then consider, you know, what are the subjects that you have or the languages that you have, and they will try to place you, you know, as accurate as possible. But I would say still largely that people have a choice, and I suppose in a province where it's multilingual like Gauteng, I think also people will move towards schools that provide the language that they have training in. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. Mr. Naat, would you also like to answer the question? Can you easily find qualified teachers who can teach in minority languages?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. Very interesting question. And also, did it also our challenge as well. Firstly, what I can say is that for our pilot project, it's not for the whole province or district or commune, that few only because the pilot. So much easier for us to find the teacher. And we, like I mentioned earlier, we have to do an assessment, very carefully assessment to find out how many spoons will be applied and how many teachers can, who are the ethnic minority people there, and even for some Vietnamese who are teaching in the local community also can talk and think on the ethnic minority language. So we have to do on the mapping and also assessment very carefully before designing how many school, how many teacher and thing. After that, we have to design one teacher training program. Because like I mentioned earlier, for our program, it's not only about the language development, but also about the quality of education. So that's why the training program is not only to equip, enhance teachers themselves in terms of the writing in the ethnic minority language, but also about the teaching methodology. For instance, like the child center or methodology and participatory approach and thing. So that is the very comprehensive teacher training program run parallel with the other component of the program. So that intervention help our program, how to call it, can equip not only in terms of the methodology, material, and curriculum, but also about the teacher in the pilot program. During the pilot program, we also were working very closely with the provincial teacher training college, who are done the pre-service training for the student, and many of them is from the ethnic minority people. So we prepare the next generation for the ethnic minority teacher to help and to serve for our program. So I mean, teacher is the key person to ensure for the program implementation and quality, who are the most important factor in our program. So it's not only lesson learned from our program, but also we need to work with the government as well for the policy environment to ensure for the available of the pre-service training, prepare for the coming time for the teacher who can teach in the ethnic minority language. So that's some our key highlight from our experience of the teacher. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nat. I think that we also then have to focus on teacher trainers who prepare those teachers of the next generation to teach all subjects in the different languages, also the minority, ethnic minority languages. I think that's also a very interesting point there. Thank you very much. It was very clear. Thank you. Mrs. Inge van der Weveren, are there other questions meanwhile in the chat?
Well, there's a question also for Dan and Justine. So they focus with their activities mainly on children that are 6 years or older. Can you imagine what we can do with young learners, how it could work with children younger than 6 years old?
We actually also work with children that are in kindergarten and that are taking part in summer schools. However, this is not in every city the case. So some cities actually choose to only organize summer schools for children between 6 and 12 years old. Some also take toddlers as their target audience as well. We actually apply the same training, only the examples we use are usually linked to contexts in which volunteers actually interact with younger children to make it more reliable. So actually the building blocks are the same. What is a bit different is that the teaching of Dutch and of the second language is often more or actually happens at the same time or with like only a slow delay of the first language. So those children are still fully developing their first language at home and are actually a bit more open towards informal language acquisition than is for children between ages 6 to 12.
Thank you very much, Justine Pilaert. Are there other questions? Because I see it's time, actually. Next week, we would like to see you all back Tuesday, November the 24th. We're going to talk about materials for bilingual education, but this time it will be a hands-on interactive workshop online, of course. And we have a workshop guided by, for example, Justine Pilaert on qualitative interactions. You talked about this assignment at the end of your presentation, but maybe you could repeat it to invite more people for next week. Justine.
Yes, indeed, we would be glad to actually do the training we developed with you. My colleague Dan and I will do the workshop together. The workshop will be taught in English, but the videos we are using are in Dutch, but we provided subtitles in English for any international participants that want to take part in our workshop. What we'll be doing, we will be using our time to actually perform a hands-on session. You don't have to prepare anything beforehand, but we will walk you through the video interaction training. We will show you authentic materials, and in that way really learn you how you can focus on qualitative interaction and what those features actually are by means of those videos.
Okay.
Yeah, we will work in small groups. So if you want a hands-on session and are interested in our videos, then we would be happy to say hello in the workshop session next week.
Thank you, Justine. Then the other workshop from Gansu about multilingual material opportunities for teaching mathematics, if I understand well. Would you like to give some extra information about your workshop next week, next Tuesday, November the 24th?
Yeah, sure, Karen. So what I shared with you today was the literacy stuff. And we've spent 2021 developing our mathematics bilingual materials. So that's videos as well as teaching materials. And what we will be doing in the section, I mean, we'll be going through some of this multilingual material and unpacking the multilingual aspects of it and how multilingualism has been integrated in the teaching material, in the videos and so forth. There is a slight bit of preparation in a sense that if you could just page through it, I'm not expecting you to read it, you know, like a study guide or anything like that, and look at it from more of a visual and more of a cueing point of view. And yeah, so looking forward, you know, from hearing, actually from learning from people. I think it's more of, I also want to learn from everyone else that will be participating and seeing and learning different ways of incorporating multilingualism in materials development.
Okay, thank you very much. If you want, that's the message for all the participants. In the chat, you will find a link to both assignments. If you click on it, you see a short description of both assignments. And we hope to see you all next Tuesday then, November 24th at 9:30 for both hands-on sessions about multilingual education. I would like to thank all the presenters. So I would like to thank Mr. Nat, I would like to thank Mrs. Tsatse, and I would like to thank Mrs. Klert and Mr. De Buystra for the interesting presentations. We learned a lot, and not only about language strategies in bilingual education, but also about co-creation with local experts, with experienced teachers, to come to this new attitude to learn from each other and to develop these very valuable projects. Thank you all. Thank you. And I see you next week. If you want, you can stay online for some more questions if you want. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for being there, and see you for the next session. Goodbye.